Hello, everyone, and welcome today to the Western Spirit. Today, we have a very special guest. My guest today is Aimen Dean. Aimen was once a member of Al-Qaeda. He became a spy for British intelligence inside the heart of global jihad. He was born in Saudi Arabia, radicalized in his youth, and later, obviously, after joining Al-Qaeda, became a spy or an inside man for MI6, the British intelligence agency. Aimen spent nearly a decade feeding critical intelligence to the West, helping thwart terror attacks and exposing networks from the inside. Today, he's one of the world's leading experts on Islamic extremism, intelligence, and counterterrorism. And Ayman, it's a true pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
So, Ayman, I want to start with something that I read of yours a few days ago on X, formerly Twitter. You started off by saying, "Let me be clear, I'm no Zionist, and I don't think anyone can think you're a Zionist from your background." But you write that you write something very interesting, and I just wanted you to maybe tell us instead of me reading it. You maybe give us the lowdown, explain to us what you were saying and why you felt that you needed to say it now.
I think I was talking on behalf of the silent majority here in the GCC, in particular, the Gulf countries, because for over 7.5 decades now, we've been told the story again and again that our um, most core cause must be the Palestinian cause, and this was always the case. However, recently it started to become um, a conventional wisdom that the Palestinian cause is no longer either convenient or, to be frank, like in basically something that we should attach our future as a region to. I mean, the GCC over decades, half a century to be precise, gave every kind of possible support they could give to the so-called Palestinian cause, whether it was the PLO in the past from 1964 onwards, and then all the way to the Palestinian Authority. And as the Arab Spring came, and I think 2011 was a pivotal point here, as the Arab Spring came, and I don't call it the Arab Spring. From in my opinion, basically, I call it the the Arab cursed autumn, um, the Arab winter, but it's a cursed one. In my opinion, people just realize what role the Muslim Brotherhood, which Hamas was part of, was in terms of being a vehicle for instability and chaos that the Iranian regime and the Ayatollahs in Iran and Bahrain used as a vehicle towards destabilization of the region, which, by the way, backfired against them in Syria, which we will talk about later. But the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood started to show their true colors, this is when immediately the UAE and Saudi Arabia immediately countered. If you notice that in 2013 they supported the move by the armed forces in Egypt to remove the then Muslim Brotherhood president Mohammed Morsi, the post-revolution president, because it became obvious that Iran was extending its tentacles into Egypt, and it became very clear that Egypt was becoming a strategic headache for them. Yemen is the same thing when it comes to not only just the Iranians extending their presence there, but also extending their presence there with the naive help of the Muslim Brotherhood. So slowly, gradually, the fact of the matter is that Hamas, because it was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, started to be viewed with such lens that wait a minute, like you are part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now we have to go back and reopen all the old files. What did you do exactly? Like in every time there was a peace process from 1991 in Madrid, 1993 in Oslo, and afterwards, you were there as the saboteur, as the force that always, put a gun to the PLO's, spine, behind their back, and started, sabotaging one peace process after another. Um, and I think this is when everyone realized that, wait a minute, like, I mean, was Hamas really a Palestinian liberation movement, or in all truth and reality, an Iranian creation from the start. In 1985, Hezbollah was born in Lebanon as the حركة المقاومة الإسلامية في لبنان, the Islamic resistance movement in Lebanon. Then Hamas, 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, was established as حركة المقاومة الإسلامية. They dropped the Lebanon bit, and then they started this process of mimicking exactly like the tactics of Hezbollah, with whatever resources that were available to them within the so-called occupied territories in the West Bank and Gaza. I think many people, I get always like these conspiracy theories telling me like basically it was the Israelis who created Hamas to split them from the PLO. It was this, it was that, like and just thinking about it, like how could you convince a person like Ahmed Yassin and all of the other founders around him, Rantisi, Zahar, Abu Marzouk, and all the others, like basically that.
To be Israeli agents.
Yeah, they're all Israeli agents somehow. Like
And the
so
Palestinians themselves in Gaza, in this polls, they have legitimately more support now than the Fatah, and so then you would have to convince, I guess, people talking to you that that at least half of the Palestinians are Israeli agents at this point.
exactly, exactly, and so they created that kind of Islamic secular resistance, and national liberation resistance of the PLO, which focused on national Palestinian identity, didn't work. You know what? Like, we as a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood here, the in the occupied territories, we're gonna lead the struggle. But this time, the the fact of the matter is that when finally Arafat started recognizing Israel as a de facto state, like it is a state, it is a reality, and started advocating for a Palestinian state within the West Bank and Gaza, this is when Hamas decided to add in its charter the destruction of Israel and the river to the sea, and from from Eilat all the way to the Netanya, I think, like basically in the Lebanese Israeli border. So this is where this suddenly it became a pan-Islamist rather than a pan-Arabist. And the reason for that is because Khomeini established the Quds Day, Jerusalem Day, and in order to get the support from Iran. Now, I used to struggle a lot with people when I tell them that these movements are really, their roots are in Iran, and it is from the very, very early stages. And they keep telling me, Ayman, you are anti-Iranian, which is, I'm not like, I'm an anti-Ayatollah, not anti-Iranian. But nonetheless, you're anti-current regime in Iran. Nothing you say can be taken objectively. And I say, guys, I'm not just an analyst, I'm an intelligence operative. And there are videos, that shows videos, like, absolute videos, like, shows in 1991, 1992, Ahmed Yassin, with the presence of so many people, including Haniya, in that area. Imagine, this is 1991, 1992. We're talking here about roughly what, like 35 years? 35 years ago, where meeting Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei, in his usual office, in which he always received world leaders, including Putin and Assad and all others. He is there, Ahmed Yassin, and Rantisi, and Zahar, and Haniya, all of them there, 1991, 1992. We're talking about as early as that. I used to say the same about Al-Houthis, when I used to tell them that Badr al-Din al-Houthi, the father of current leader Abdul Malik, and the father of the previous leader, the founder, the real founder, Hussein Badr al-Din al-Houthi, I used to say they were there in 1991, 1992. In fact, there is a picture I've seen. There is a picture I've seen it, like and I was shown by a previous Yemeni ambassador to one of the global powers. He showed me that picture. They had the Yemeni intelligence of Hussein Badr al-Din al-Houthi in military uniform in 1988, fighting with the Badr Brigade of the Iraqis on the Iranian side against Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein. So it's like, what more do you want? And then people say, oh, well, maybe it's just because they want money and support. I say the Iranians don't give anything for free. They have no free lunch, dear friends. Like, I mean, they
They're
give it for,
famously very frugal with their wealth. They don't like giving out money for free.
unless if there is a tangible benefit for them, then they wouldn't give you any money or any support or any tangible help. And therefore, this is where we fall into the trap of not seeing that there is a octopus in Tehran, the head is in Tehran, and the tentacles are reaching. And ironically, it is reaching towards two particular states. It's threatening two particular nation states in the region, Israel and Saudi Arabia. So the tentacles are going into Baghdad, into Damascus, into Lebanon, and then into Gaza, and then into Yemen. This way, it's engulfing two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia. Because from the point of view of the Iranian regime, there are two regional competitors. There are two regional obstacles towards total Iranian Ayatollah's, revolutionary hegemony in the region, which is Israel and Saudi Arabia. And so, as someone who was born in Saudi Arabia, I'm originally from Bahrain, which is another country destabilized completely by the Iranians. By the way, half of my family is Bahraini, the other half is Saudi, with some small branch, in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And I'm half Lebanese from my mother's side. So you can imagine that not only my understanding, but also my worry, is, I'm motivated by genuine fear, of Iran's intentions. And there are so many incidents in my past, like, basically, that also justifies that. And therefore, from my side, I started to see something, the bigger picture. This isn't any longer about Palestinian liberation or Palestinian cause. It's tentacles of Iran trying, basically to squeeze, to strategically suffocate, two countries in the region, to blackmail them strategically in what became a grand Middle Eastern Mexican standoff. Everyone put a gun to the other head. Like, Saudi Arabia has two guns to its head, which is the Iraqi militias in the north and the Houthis in the south. And Israel had two guns to its head, Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south. Perfect. I mean, it's the perfect strategic, tentacles slowly, gradually coming to suffocate both countries from both sides, north and south. And it was taking something like 25 years to fruition. Everyone was seeing that slow, but definite and steady and determined motivation by the Iranian regime to do so. And only idiots, who don't understand strategy, don't understand the Iranian regime motives of existence to begin with and strategy in the region. Only those who didn't see the big picture failed to understand the conflict, and kept insisting on squeezing the Hamas issue within a narrow Palestinian narrative, Israeli-Palestinian conflict narrative, when in fact this is just a brigade within the wider army of the Iranian Ayatollah's regime, designed for the region.
But wait, I wanted to just one more thing that your point in your tweet was that you may not like Israel as a person living in one of the Gulf states or in Saudi Arabia or in all these other places, and they obviously a lot of people don't like Israel, and that's okay. But you said Israel has never shot at us a BB gun. Even you even said it like that. Even never shot at us even a BB gun, and yet you then went all the way from the 70s. You described every time a Palestinian terrorist group killed or shot or hurt either the Gulf states, Saudi, all these other places. So you were trying to make a point, meaning that there's a country that we don't like, but it's not hurting us, and there's people that we do like or say that we like or we're supposed to like because they're Arabs like us, because they're same religion as us, whatever the reason may be, and yet they keep on killing us. And I guess that was your main point, was that we need to be practical. You wrote there, we need to be strategic and living in the Gulf Arab states or Saudi Arabia or wherever we are, right?
Exactly. We said, in my opinion, and when I sat with many people, whether family members or relatives or friends, academics, people who work in the state, apparatus, whether it is Saudi, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, even, um, we we talk about the fact that why do we have to tie our fate, the region entire fate, to be hostage to a cause where the people themselves are, the Palestinians are not exactly very big fans of us either. Sometimes we wonder, like, do they hate the Israelis as much as they hate us? Because just look at the venomous language, that Palestinians have in um, social media about Saudis. Just mention the word Gulfies, uh, you know, to them, and immediately, and we have in the social media, construct, we have a word for them. We usually call them the Arabs of the North, so Northern Arabs, and we view them like, basically, as people who are, first of all, jealous of the success that we have created. After all, the GCC countries have the highest HDI in the region, along with the Israelis. Like, basically, we are the highest HDI, Human Development Index, way above everyone else. We have, basically the highest living standards, in the region. And some people say, "Oh, without the oil, you're nothing." But I live in a city, Dubai, which doesn't have oil. It has trade, it has mines, it has visionaries. It's all about governance, but only because of the monarchy system that we created, which they hate, because they are, to some extent, social nationalists. So socialist nationalists, like, basically, just don't like any form of patriarchal, tribal, in a monarchy system, which they don't like. They view it like, basically, as Bedouin and backward. But in fact, because what we call that the Palestinians always have something alongside some of the Lebanese, we say that they have, in Arabic, al-istihqaq al-hadari, civilizational entitlement. It's like, oh, we are more civilized than you. It's just because we dress with Arab, headgear, and we are wearing our traditional clothes. Guess what? Like, basically, there are more English speakers and French speakers and other, like, basically, language speakers here than in the Palestinian territories. We have, more PhDs here per capita than the Palestinian territories. We have more master degrees per capita than the Palestinian territories. And at the end of the day, we have higher, living standards, is because we decided to follow our visionary leaders. But they, however, decided to follow their warlords. Whether it is the bureaucrats of Fatah or the bloodthirsty fanatical zealots of Hamas, we decided to follow visionary leaders, patriarchal in their system, yes, but at least that patriarchy and that tribal sense of paternal leadership has led us into a path of progress, of development, of openness, of tolerance, and and it is increasing day by day. Just look at how Riyadh has changed. I mean, 2015 to 2025, I can't believe the change. And they hate us for this. Funny enough, they hate us for this. Every time we have new musical festival, every time we have a new building opening, every time we have a new project inauguration, either in Saudi or the UAE, and they immediately, the Palestinians in the social media, come and spoil the party. What's the point of this if your Palestinian brothers are starving in Gaza? Well, we didn't tell you to go and wage a war, you idiots. And then they come and say, "Oh, you are dancing, on the blood of our, brothers and sisters, of your brothers and sisters in Gaza." While at the same time, the Icon Mall, opened in Ramallah, and they were dancing and being happy in Ramallah. If your fellow Palestinians are not exactly like, having the same solidarity, why do you ask us for it? No, thank you so much. Even during the war with Yemen, Saudi Arabia was having festivals and musical concerts and projects announced and everything, because just because we're fighting a war, we don't forget to live. And that was a war for survival, also against Iran, just as Israel was fighting Hamas, we were fighting the Houthis, just for the survival of our project and
Aiden,
our progression here in the region.
It's very weird also that you say we have to live, because their leaders, for sure on the Hamas side, but also a lot of the clerics and people on the Fatah side will say, we don't care about life, we care about death. Our struggle is a struggle of death. They even say we don't, when one of the main things that we see every time there's a terrorist attack here, they go interview the mother of the terrorist, and she says, yeah, my son's died, I'm so happy he died, I'm so happy he gave his life for the cause, and this and that. And it seems to me, or also I think Hania even said, they celebrate life, we celebrate death, and that's why we will win. And so when you say we celebrate life, we need to live, it's like it's a totally different culture of Arabs than the Arabs where I live. It's like it's night and day, right?
Yes, and I tell you why. First of all, when I was young, and you will read it in my own biography, I grew up actually to become a imam. I wanted to become a cleric. I wanted to become a Sharia student. And do you know what is the first thing you learn? There is something called maqasid al-Sharia, the purpose of Sharia. What is the purpose of Sharia? And do you know what is the first principle? The first principle of Sharia is the preservation of life. Don't take my word for it. Go and read it. I challenge every imam who says we love death and everything and all of that, and say, isn't maqasid al-Sharia, isn't it that the purpose of Sharia is the preservation of life? And by the way, the preservation of life, like basically for everyone, that the default setting of Sharia is to preserve life. So as I said to you, as a student of Sharia, it said maqasid al-Sharia, which means the purpose of Sharia, why Sharia exists in the first place, is the first sentence there. It says the preservation of life. So when people say, "Oh, we celebrate death," we say, "Excuse me, that's not what we read." In the books of Sharia. The books of Sharia tells you that the first purpose of Sharia, the reason that it exists, is the preservation of life. So there is a sanctity for life. Now, in your perverse, twisted universe, maybe like there is another faith that you invented, where death became the default setting. The Islam I grew up with in Saudi Arabia and in Bahrain and in UAE, like basically, is the Islam where the preservation of life trumps everything else. And if they celebrate death, maybe they need professional help, both psychological and theological, in order to recalibrate their moral and theological compass. To be honest.
Amen. I want to ask you about my brother's Aiden. I want to ask you about the our neighbors to the north here. So the leader, Gulani, Ashara, whatever he'll go by next, he used to be the leader of branches of Al-Qaeda, Nusra, ISIS, whatever. He was rolling in all these jihadi networks. Now he's the leader of Syria after they overthrew Assad. Thank God, by the way. And that before we even go to instead of him, it's good that he's gone. The Iranians lost a major player. Now Hezbollah can't get their weapons shipped in as easily, and we see they're like collapsing in Lebanon. So that's a good thing in and of itself. We also saw in the war with Iran, by the way, that he led Israel without any no, just fly right over and attack Iran, no problem. So he obviously hates the Shiites because you were in Al Qaeda, so you will tell us that they really hate the Shiites almost as much as the Jews, right? It's the, it's almost, or maybe even more. I don't know. So the he keeps on saying that he wants to modernize. He's meeting all the people. The Saudis are telling the Americans to take off the sanctions. Trump takes off the sanctions. Now we hear lots of reports from inside Israel and from outside that Israelis and Syrians are talking with each other directly, not indirectly, and that maybe they will even join the Abraham Accords, or if not all the way, there will be security arrangements and this and that. So I want to ask you, as someone who knows Al Qaeda from the inside and who knows how these people think, is he still with this ideology, but he's doing, trying to hide it, or has he become more moderate, you think? And also, should we trust him?
This episode is brought to you by Ayn Rand Center Israel. We meet every alternate Friday to study and discuss the philosophy of Ayn Rand, author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. The topics range from ethics to politics, reason versus faith, aesthetics, psychology, and much, much more. This is the only place in Israel where Ayn Rand's unique philosophy is accessible to you, and you're welcome to come learn all about it. It's a great opportunity to learn and meet really interesting people. Attendance is free, and first-timers get a free book. We meet every alternate Friday at the WeWork in Sarona Market, and we like to keep the intellectual discussion going afterwards with some great food and drinks. Click the link for more info on Ayn Rand Center Israel.
I'm going to tell you something that might be a little bit surprising. I feel that his journey more or less mirrored mine, in realizing how dangerous and poisonous this ideology is. Remember that he went to Iraq to fight against the American forces, and then he was captured 2005, then released 2011. During these 6.5, 7 years, based on information I got from, basically, intelligence operatives, from Western powers, from the Five Eyes. I sat with one of them, I remember, in 2018 in Berlin, not a German, but it's from another of the Five Eyes countries. I sat, with that senior intelligence operative, a lady, and she told me this. She told me, look, during the, and that was in 2018, she told me that from 2005 until 2011, it became very clear that Gulani, as we knew him at the time, was a model prisoner, someone who was frequenting the library, and he was reading 1 or 2 books a week, according to his records. So he was, well educated, let's put it this way. And the librarians of this prison, who were either Americans or working for the Americans, were very impressed by the fact that he started to show, a considerable change and shift in his ideology, and started to show far less hatred towards America, and started to show far more, anger and hatred towards the Assad regime and their backers in Tehran. It so happened that after he was released, it was the uprising in Syria. So he was sent there because he was still a member of ISIS. But ISIS wasn't as ISIS as the monsters as we know. They were still in that evolution. And so they were still called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They sent him there, but he had different ideas from them. He wasn't going there to create an Al-Qaeda branch in Syria or ISIS branch in Syria for the launch of attacks against other countries. He started to abandon the notion of global jihad and believed that our jihad should be in Syria and should be to fight injustice and to topple the Assad regime. 2013, that came to a big clash, because this is when the leaders of ISIS, especially Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, realized that this guy is not our guy. So the split happened between what was known as Jabhat al-Nusra, the ISIS branch in Syria at that time, and ISIS. They split. They became 2 distinct factions. And this is when it became very clear that Gulani was thinking, okay, these guys are so crazy. I'm not going to make Syria into another Afghanistan. We have to learn from the mistakes of Afghanistan. I'm not going to make it into another, create a new Taliban to be a incubator and hosting, a host for a series of attacks against the West. No, I'm not going to do that. So he became the personal project of Hakan Fidan. Hakan Fidan, as you know, is the foreign minister of Turkey, but at that time he was the head of the Turkish intelligence. And as the head of the Turkish intelligence, he took Muhammad al-Gulani personally, basically as his personal project. He learned Turkish, befriended him. And why? Because al-Gulani has all the blueprints, and the intelligence and the ground, information needed to dismantle ISIS. So he was passing on that to the Turks, and the Turks, of course, used that, to its fullest extent, to leverage that with the Americans, which they did. And the Americans, of course, by 2016, they started to become wiser. How could the Turks come up with such precise, intelligence on ISIS to the point where we are dismantling them one by one. And then, when Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, al-Zawahiri, when he started to feel, is this man with us or against us? Is this man like really ours? And so they started sending their people to go and to try to lead alongside him. So they sent Abu al-Faraj al-Masri, Abu Abdullah al-Muhajir, they sent Ibrahim Khair, Abu Siyasa. They sent so many of their leaders, the top leaders of Al-Qaeda, the Egyptians. And one by one, they were taken out by US drones and, by precise intelligence. And that precise intelligence, again, coming from the Turks. So it became very clear to the Americans themselves that this is coming from very, very high, top, source. Who is that? They worked it out. They asked the Turks that, to the point where in early 2018, the Americans themselves sat down with Gulani in a controlled environment in Turkey and had that talk with him. And this is when he told them, according to the intelligence source I have, had that conversation with him, and he told them that I never had anything against you. I have no problem, basically with the Americans. My problem basically is with Assad and his Iranian backers and Hezbollah and all of these Iraqi militias, basically roaming around killing our people here in Syria. And he said, I grew up in Riyadh. I grew up watching Disney movies, including Bambi. And that's why basically, they always, whenever they refer to him, basically, Commander Bambi, there was that kind of an affinity with the Americans. So this is why when a privateer, someone basically from Syria, a son of a previous minister, living somewhere in the Arab world, and he was telling me in 2020, in July, that I'm going to collect the $10 million bounty on Gulani's head. I know where he is quarantining for COVID, so I'm going to become a millionaire soon. And I said to him, you're not going to get it. He said, no, I already in touch with the American side. They are extremely happy. They are verifying, the intelligence is very verified. We have a proof of life. We're going to, they're going to go and they will do it. I said to him, it's not going to happen. And so, in a few days later, I called him and I said, nothing happened, my dear friend. And he said, oh, those American bastards, they took it all the way to the chain of command. And then from the White House, you remember it was Trump's White House at the time, in July of 2020, it came down that targeting this person is not in the national security interests of the US, even though he is most wanted and with $10 million bounty on his head. It became clear to me that this man, by preventing Idlib, his province, at that time, the free province that he was governing, from becoming a staging ground to terrorism abroad, when he told the TIP, the Turkestan Islamic Party, which is made up of Chinese citizens, Uyghurs, who were living there, thousands of them, he told them, you're welcome to join us and to join us in this fight, but you are not to you're not to raise a finger against China from here, which they abide by. And he told Hurras ad-Din, the other, proto-Al-Qaeda types in Idlib, one bullet against any foreign entity inside or outside Syria, and you're all expelled. And so he made it very clear that I'm not going to allow Syria to be a staging ground for terrorism. I realized then that he did something which is a first in history. The radical leader of a radical organization became de-radicalized. He de-radicalized the top tier of the command structure, and the de-radicalization started to go from top to bottom, to the point where, they became government overnight. And when they took over, it was like, a hand into a silk glove. It was an easy transition for them, because they wanted to be a proper government in waiting. They practice in Idlib province all the aspects of governance. And so they came in, and the first thing is zero enemies, zero problems. And because they are Salafists, in their hearts, they are Salafist on the Saudi style, by the way. They are not, Muslim Brotherhood. They are not transitional ideologue. They are not a global jihadist. They are, what we call basically the typical Salafist local jihadist, So they took over their country, and the first thing they want to do above everything else is, we want to live. Just like the Saudis, just like us. And if you see the bromance, I call it the bromance that happened between MBS and Al-Shara when they visited. He just told him, most likely exactly what I told you now. And the Saud is already aware, of this man's transition, from global jihadism when he was young in his 20s to, pragmatist realism, that he is not building an Islamist country. He is building a country where the elements of the leadership are Muslim rather than Islamist. He is trying to separate, the ideology from the state. And if you ask him, what are your guiding principles? He will tell you, I want electricity, I want telecommunications, I want services, I want healthcare, I want good education, and I want good living standards for my people. Simple. This
Can I
is the
just
type
push
of person.
back on you, Eamon, just on one issue? That once the he took over, there were lots of videos and reports that came out of people either from his supporters, or this was the claim, or from people that were like giving a wink and a nod to like go do what you need to do. We're not going to stop you from killing Alawites, torturing them. The Druze, the Israelis were saying, no, we're going to protect the Druze in southern Syria, all this type of stuff. Then it calmed down, and I don't think I've heard anything about it in the last few months. So was that, you think, in the beginning, like the growing stages where he still didn't control everything and then he took over? Or was this sort of his people were like not listening to? How do you see what was happening in the beginning?
From the beginning, I mean, I'm committed to the truth and I'm committed to facts and I follow facts. And for me, there is always, to every event, there is a chain of events. So you have to follow the chain of events all the way to the beginning. What happened really in the coast in Syria in March this year was Miqdad Fataha, one of the worst war criminals, on the Assad side, who fled and went into hiding in the mountains of the coast, issued a warning 11 minutes on his own Twitter account, threatening everyone, even Alawites who switched their allegiance to the new state. And he said, I'm going to come for you first before I go, and I, kill the new Syrian security forces. And he did what he did. He gathered his forces. He first kidnapped 30 security forces, selected those from Idlib and from other particular tribes who he knew can provoke, executed them live on the camera, and then published these videos. And then he said, okay, come and get me. And what happened after that was an orgy of killing, where people just from these cities poured in with their weapons, before the proper army could prevent them and, stop the killing. So it was intercommunal killing sparked by, one of the Assad war criminals doing that. And this is where we start the chain of events. And this is like, basically what the, the national, inquiry committee into the coast events, like in the BBC published recently. And there is no question that those who were provoked, these units that were provoked, like acted without authority, and they went. And this is why the army went in to keep everyone from sliding into a civil war. I must say, like, actually, the fact that after the liberation of, Damascus and the liberation of Sadnaya prison in particular, everything that people saw there, and the mass graves, some of the mass graves, like, were 6,000, 8,000, 15,000, and the missing. There are still 150,000 missing. Many of them will never be seen because of the industrial, shredding and, pressing machines they found in Sadnaya prison. They will never be found. The fact of the matter is that it hasn't been a Rwanda style, Tutsi against Hutu, is a miracle in itself. And this is how we should see it,
Yes,
to be honest.
I agree.
Yeah.
But do you think that the minorities should be worried, like the Kurds, the Alawites? The Alawites, I assume, should be worried in terms of just regular people trying to, I guess, people who might have been in the past supporting the regime. Maybe now people will take it out on them. Or is he really protecting them? Because it seems to me that we haven't heard anything in the past few months. So maybe there is a sort of effort to try to protect these people.
He knows that if anything happened to the minorities, then his dreams of, good living standards for all Syrians will go out of the window altogether. So he knows how to play the international game. I'm not saying he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart. I hope he is doing it out of the goodness of his heart. But if he's not, most likely, and I believe this, is pure pragmatism, because right now he needs to build a nation. And
The whole place is destroyed.
yeah, he needs to build a nation. And he knows that he can't build a nation. He can't build a nation without a comprehensive, non-aggression pact plus, at least with the Israelis. And between you and me, um, if I was to advise the Israeli government from here, like, basically, I would say that the best gesture that Israel would do towards Syria right now is to help them with their water and agriculture sector. Because no one, the Israelis are the best of the best in the Middle East when it comes to water and irrigation, in innovative irrigation techniques, innovative agriculture techniques. These could go a long way of building the best of goodwill, between the two peoples. Forget the governments, forget everyone. Like, just this alone, especially with a country that is suffering from exceptional depletion of their water resources and drought. And so, if Israel, like, basically want absolute stability next door to their neighbors, and also gratitude from their neighbors, help them with their food security, help them with their water security, it will go a long way.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about something that's interesting to me. We both spoke about it before we started recording. The Wall Street Journal reports, and now I just read in a few Israeli Hebrew outlets that interview some of the people that we're going to talk about. These are 5 sheikhs of 5 different what's called tribes, chamulas in Arabic, that live in the Hebron area, which is, it's very weird. Hebron always brings out either the terrorists or the new minds in terms of the national conflict. So you'll have a lot of these tribes that are sending terrorists in, and the same tribe keeps on getting, I forgot the name of that tribe, but they always have these terrorists that come out of there. And then you have these bunch of tribes that even when I lived, here, I'm giving you a secret. It's not a secret. I lived near Bethlehem for like 7 years, and we would have these, we were settlers, but we would meet with goodwill, like with our neighbors. So we would have meetings with the sheikhs and with the imams of the mosques in the area, and they would come meet with us so we can coexist. There was also fighting the extremists and sort of like trying to, even if you might not like me, I live next to you, so let's try to live with each other. And they would always come from Hebron area, the most of them. So it's like a weird dynamic. And also Hebron itself has a lot of bad history. Goldstein, who killed I think over 30 Muslim people who prayed in the dome of the, what, I forgot what it's called in English, and yeah, and also a lot of Jews who died in the areas over there. So you have this weird dynamic where on the one hand, bloody war for years already, on the other hand, a lot of goodwill from some of the people there. And these 5 sheikhs come out and send a letter to one of the Israeli ministers near Barkat and say, listen, we want to leave the Palestinian Authority. We will join the Abraham Accords as a separate entity in Hebron. We will govern ourselves and we will be friends. We will accept the Jews. They write, we will accept the Jews, accept Israel as a Jewish state, which is 100% new for Palestinians to say. And we just want to have good relations with you. How do you explain this? Like, is there really a Palestinian? Every time something like this happens, I say, is there really a Palestinian national identity? Because every time something like this happens, you're saying, wait, are you Palestinian or are you part of this tribe, this Hamula? What tribe is over? What triumphs over what?
Look, this is what happened in the absence of good, decent leadership. I mean, the Palestinians, or those who identify as Palestinians within the Holy Land context, are always trapped between the failure of corrupt bureaucrats and the bloodthirst, ideology, of Hamas, and their patrons from Tehran. So the tribes comes together, whether it is Al-Ja'abra, Al-Ja'bari, Tamimis, Al-Natsha, Al-Qawasim, Al-Muhtasib, all of these tribes around Hebron. So when they come together and they say, Well, first of all, what did Hamas ever do to us? Nothing. They actually increased the security inconveniences, around our region. So no good movement, no good, no good jobs, nothing like that. I mean, and in the meantime, we are neglected totally by Ramallah, and by those who are driving the latest, models of Mercedes and BMWs, and they have a new mall, and they have nightclubs that basically party until 3 a.m. in the morning. So what do they know about us, the Bedouins? Basically the tribes, the people basically who are living here for hundreds of years, and we need services. Where are the services? So when they feel like this, they say, well, I rather make my peace, with Tel Aviv, rather than, being governed by incompetent, corrupt bureaucrats, or bloodthirsty radicals. This is where the tribal leadership fill in the void. And this is why I say dismiss the tribes at your own peril. So how if you listen to the first and the second and the third podcast, episodes of my podcast Conflicted, which were aired in February and March of 2019, more than 6 years ago. From the beginning, it's called Conflicted. From the beginning, I advocated for monarchy, and I say I'm unapologetic monarchist because I believe in it. I believe it's the tribe, and the tribes form sheikdoms, and the sheikdoms form emirates, and the emirates form kingdoms. That's the hierarchy. And if we ignore that this is, I think it's worked so well, for the past 7,000 years since the days of Mesopotamia. I can safely say we have come to the end of the trial period. I think we can adopt it without any reservation in the
You
region.
mean for this region, right? Because other regions have different types of stuff. But for this, you're saying this is the type of the Arab culture. This is what has worked. This is what, and this is what is working.
Exactly. We don't answer to warlords. We don't answer to bureaucrats. We don't answer to someone who was elected because their tribes, basically, pushed him for election. No, we want that kind of conciliatory tribal coalition that would then, put together a patriarchal, paternal, father figure, for the nation who would lead with vision, and there is far more. If you look at the Arab, world, there were 10 countries that were affected by the Arab Spring, whether it is 5 monarchies, 5 republics. The 5 republics either collapsed or in deep, trouble right now. Civil wars and millions of dead and tens of millions displaced. If you look at the 5 monarchies that were affected by the Arab Spring, which is Morocco, how many people died there? None. Jordan, maybe 2 people during the 2011. In Saudi Arabia, maybe 14 fatalities. In Oman, 6 fatalities. In Bahrain, which was affected because of Iran's constant interference. Even that, with the massive amount of incitement by Iran, the number of the fatalities were about 140. Half of them were police officers. So it shows you actually that monarchies don't kill their own people, because kings, princes, sheikhs, they see these people are their kids. You just don't kill your own kids. While dictators and usurpers and presidents who came on fake elections, they see these people as competitors, as enemies, and need to be killed. And this is why this system works.
So you're saying that when the Americans or the Europeans want to push democracy, like they tried in Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever they did, or Libya even, that's not going to work. Basically, that's
You
basically.
know, like I mean, in even in my episode in Afghanistan, in my podcast, I said this. I said I was only 22 at that time, so of course, basically, my voice within MI6, will be tiny. But I said, can I at least recommend, knowing Afghanistan, living there for 3 years, with the Taliban, with the tribes, with the drug warlords, with everyone. So please, if you want peace in Afghanistan, if you want the people to forget the Taliban, please, can you restore His Majesty, King Muhammad Zahar Shah, back? He's living in Italy. He was a wonderful king. A wonderful king, just like most of our kings in the region, has been deposed by pro-Soviet, communist subversive elements. He was full on pro-democracy champion. He transformed Afghanistan from an absolute monarchy into constitutional monarchy. He was absolutely, the right person for the right job, because people will adhere to a king. The tribes will come around the king. And they told me the Americans won't buy that because America rebelled against the king. They will never install a king. Forget about it, Aimen. Are you out of your mind? And I said, no, the Americans are out of their mind. If they
And we see who was right.
their system, yeah. The same thing in Iraq. Iraq was a kingdom. The king Faisal, God bless his soul, Faisal II was a young, beautiful king, only 22-year-old. When they machine gunned him, basically in 1958, killed him, buried him in a gutter, basically beside on the side of the road until Saddam Hussein came and restored him in a mausoleum. But do you know what he said, Saddam Hussein, when he restored him to the mausoleum, when he finally opened the mausoleum? He said, all the bloodshed, all the assassinations, all the wars and the conflicts, everything that happened in Iraq after you, maybe it was your curse. Can you please just lift your curse upon us? Please just let your soul be at peace. Because the way he and his mother and his, female cousins and everyone against the wall shot, without mercy, even though they were Hashemites, and buried a animal beside the street, and he was actually still alive when they took him to prison. They let him bleed there, on the corridor, on the floor. So it's all Soviet Union communists, work. And you see, since then, Iraq never saw peace. And this is why, when I say that the American democratic project and experiment in the region failed, this is not an understatement. I mean, it is an absolute fact. And this is why I advocate for, what I call the ninth monarchy, for Syria to become a monarchy, for Ahmad al-Shara, by right of conquest, by right of, taking, position by power, by right of, entering Damascus. Just declare yourself a king and safeguard the future of Syria. That way, the tribes, the minorities, everyone, will feel safer.
We are getting out of time. So I want to ask you one last. I wanted to talk about Iran. We spoke a little bit about it. I will just say that you wrote something which I think is true. The war has not ended. It's a pause. We'll see it go up again. Their ideology cannot, I guess, agree even on a theological level to stop the war. They will never give in unless they're totally defeated, and that will have to happen one of these days. So we're going to see it, and sooner or later it'll come back at some point. They're definitely going to try at some point to restore their nuclear capabilities. It's part of their theology. It's part of how they think they can even keep power within Iran. So, and I agree with you on that. So I don't want to get into it. I do want to ask you one thing that I saw you a few years back. I was researching you, and I saw that you were interviewed, I think in the UK, and you were asked about immigration to West and about how the West treats immigrants from Islamic countries. And you said something to the effect of, maybe I'll just let you say it. My question would be, I guess, is we see that in a country like where you are, if someone would be a Muslim Brotherhood member, they would be taken care of because they know the danger. They understand, and I think your foreign minister at some point said this in the last few years. But in the UK, the dominant or one of the dominant strains of Islam is the Muslim Brotherhood, and even more dangerous than the Muslim Brotherhood, some of them. In other European countries, it might be even worse. The Europeans, in the name of, I guess, diversity and equity and all this like multiculturalism, they are hurting the Muslims, even the Muslims who are not radicalized. They're hurting people like you. And so I guess maybe lastly, why do you think this is happening, and what are the consequences looking 10 years ahead, let's say, in the
This is, unfortunately, is the result of the failure of governance in many parts of Muslim countries, whether in North Africa or Asia. I wrote a tweet. I said, look, we are now in the age of information revolution. You don't have to travel in person and cross oceans and mountains just to tell the West that you hate it. You can do it from the safety of your home. But the reality is that the West is unknowingly or knowingly, with some, hidden, death wish they have, They are importing their own, doom. I see it with my own eyes, and look, at the end of the day, just because you're a Muslim, I don't have automatic loyalty to you. Seriously, and I always say to people, it's not that Islamic solidarity has to be given to every, Muslim. First of all, you have to give it to every sane, rational, logical fellow human, whether Muslim or not. That's like, basically the solidarity. And the problem is we have these people in waves coming in, and they are taking a full advantage of the lenient free speech and personal freedoms laws and regulations that allow them within those frames to subvert, the established order, within these societies. So at the end of the day, when you travel, when you travel to, for example, when you join a company, it's expected of you to, to absorb, the company working culture and ethics and everything and all of that, like, basically you are part of it. However, somehow, we have moved, from the principle of, if you are in Rome, do what Romans do, to the principle of, when you are in Rome, tell the Romans what to do. And this is the problem that we are facing right now in many liberal Western countries that include the US, that include, Canada, that include the entirety of the European continent.
And Eamon, can I just ask you like one follow up on that? Is where I grew up in New York. To my mom's from Israeli, she moved to America, and then I moved back to Israel to my family here. In father still lives in New York. When I visited there, like maybe I would say 6 months after the October 7th attacks here, and I saw the protests in the streets against pro Hamas. It wasn't against Israel. There was flags of Hamas, flags of Hezbollah, flags of even of the Houthis, which is amazing because their flag, Aimen, you can tell more than I. What does it say? Death to America. It says their slogan is death to America, and you have people in America raising. They probably don't know what it says, but that's my and you have there a coalition of these lefty progressives who will wear the rainbow flag and pro-gay rights and all this kind of stuff. And on the other hand, they're protesting with the coalition with people who are Islamists, radical Islamists. Not just, it's fine to, as a religious person, I can talk with you on a religious level and we could have discussions and whatever. But people who want to, or Islamic in the radical sense, which we have been talking about this whole time, and they're protesting together. And I always thought like it was a joke. It can't be. It can't be that people who are saying queers for Palestine are standing next to someone who's waving the Islamic flag. It just can't be. And yet it is. And so maybe just to finish it off, how do you look from where you are with all your years of experience and you see this on TV or wherever, and what goes through your mind?
It's the failure of the nation state. At the end of the day, our world now is going through a absolute battle, the battle for survival between the nation state as a concept, as an institution, against those who want to bring down the nation state. Though, the modern nation state is what, um, you know save us from all ills that is in the world. Like, the northern nation state is where you have a nationality, you have an identity, you have borders, you have flag, you have and you have these people coming together to protect it. It is that structure which provides safety, stability, law and order. A firefighter to come and put the fire at your house, an ambulance to come and pick you up, in an ATM machine to take your cash, a school to send your kid, the hospital, like, to treat you. These are the fruits. These are, the fundamentals, of the nation state. If you try to bring it down, and this is what they are trying to bring down, they want to, no borders. They want to bring down, like, the nation state, the police, all the structures, the patriarchy, they call it, the patriarchy system. And that's why I insist on the patriarchal system, because guess what? It works. And as the Americans always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's not broken, but you try to break it. And guess what? None of these people lived, and I lived 6 years in 4 different war zones. I seen what a collapsed nation looked like. And if they see it with their own eyes, they will run a mile away from the protest they are actually, participating in. because they don't know. It's just ignorance of what they are calling for. They are calling for the destruction of the bigger family they live within, which is the nation state. And that's why one of the reasons why I converted from extremism into realism, as I call it, and logic driven, rationalism, is the fact that we have two options: nation state or chaos, and no one can come up with any alternative to the nation state. The nation state is collapsing because of these, people who don't know what the collapse, would look like. What are the consequences of it? If the nation states don't enforce, this idea, if you don't drill it into the minds of the young, that you are blessed because of the structure, if you don't defend it intellectually, then someone else will come and fill the void in their minds and tell them there is another model.
But also, it's so weird, and this that if they succeed in tearing down the system, they never tell you. I'm not talking about the Islamists. I'm talking about the other people. They'll never tell you, and I don't think they even know if the system is actually torn down, what they would want instead of it. The Islamists themselves, they have a plan. They know what's going to happen. Those people are going to die at the end. They don't have a plan. Their plan is to kill you, and you're protesting with them because you're so short sighted, you can't see what is behind the wall once the wall comes down. And so I
Ask
think,
them, yeah, ask them what happened to the leftists and the communists and the socialists who in Iran who enabled Khomeini's revolution. They were the first to be lined up against the walls and shot. 30,000 of them. 30,000 were executed.
so it's just very sad, by the way, because these are all like in Colombia, these it costs like 60, 70,000 a year dollars to study there. And you have these rich kids from their parents, I assume a lot of them worked very hard to get where they are, and they think they're sending their kids to these great institutions where they'll be learning how to be great in life, and all the kids are studying is propaganda from their professors against the West, against the nation state, against everything, and pro all these ridiculous ideologies that will just destroy everything and are destroying everything. I'm just not, let's put Israel aside. You mentioned Yemen. That country is a hellhole right now. There's no food, there's no water, there's nothing, and people are dying of starvation. The mortality rate is in the floor, and it's like you people are like you're protesting for these ideologies, and you're paying 60, $70,000 to get indoctrinated. Go work, go do something, put the money into the stock market for your kids, and let them go do something with their lives.
Exactly.
It's very sad.
I was telling my wife that I'm going to send. My daughter is only 8, but I said there is the New York University of Abu Dhabi. The New York University of Abu Dhabi is absolutely amazing. Guess what? People get better grades there than they get basically in their American and British and Canadian counterparts. Why? Because it's purely academic. You're coming here to study, basically yes, there is some political circles discussions, but they are so civilized, so rational, so logical. You still have a freedom to talk about what you want, but do not turn it into violence and shouting matches. Actually, it's all so civilized. It's all about civilization. So I said, yes, it is $100,000 a year, but I'm willing to pay double that to save my daughter from a future indoctrination.
Yes, I never thought I would have more in common nowadays with people in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain.
You're welcome to visit, brother. So.
Yeah, my friends were there, my family was there, but like more in common with people in the Arab Gulf states than with a lot of my former neighbors in New York who are just lost their minds. And you guys and us have become like sort of fighting for just normalcy. It's like
Exactly.
it's a very weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aimen Dean, it was a pleasure talking with you as
It was
usual,
mine.
from the stuff that I hear about you and read about you. So we will keep in touch, hopefully. And obviously, we'll come visit you. You come visit us, whatever it takes.
Absolutely,
You don't
yeah.
have to be a Zionist to come here. So just buy the ticket.
Yeah.
We'll see when the war calms down a little bit. So I really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun. And you're doing important work just because the stuff that you put out there is helping bring down the temperature and making people understand there's other ways to be, I guess, how would you call it? A good person, a good religious, pious person without going to the extremist side. So thank you so much for everything. And we'll see you on our next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.